How much do you, especially if you're of working age, relate to these next couple of lines? I'm a human with no concept of having something worth doing or a purpose in life. Honestly, even if I vanished, nobody will be bothered. Kento Nanami represents a struggle that we all face, that everything can feel meaningless. We're lost and we don't know what to do. Then you go online and everyone talks about finding your purpose and you feel as though you're missing out on something, that everyone else has this meaning thing that you don't. And in particular for this video, that our jobs can feel pointless and unfulfilling. And so somehow in a series full of characters that I felt little to no connection to, this one guy made me see it all differently, to see the purpose in what can often feel like a purposeless world, but in reality it's everywhere. It's just that we've been fed false expectations of what it looks like. You know, what a beautiful, uplifting character this is. I think you guys are going to love this video. I think we all see a lot of ourselves in him, in his flat, resigned, just getting through each day kind of attitude is something that we've all had at some point, until a single mundane encounter like the ones you have multiple times a day changed that forever. I thought I had nothing to live for. Thought. Past tense. So let's go through Nanami's backstory and we'll see why and how. He initially starts off as a Jujutsu sorcerer, but after failing to save his friend Haibara, he decided to quit and entered the corporate world in what looks like a pretty high-end stockbroker job. He later returns to Jujutsu Society in spite of the horrors he saw, and we'll come back to why, because it's super interesting and obviously related to the introduction of this video. As a sorcerer, he has this quite cold, cynical front, but it's very clear that he has a strong sense of morality beneath the surface. You know, he's kind, he puts others first, he always tries to do the right thing. And our first glimpse into his past corporate life is actually from a flashback he has on Death's Door against Mahito, where, following the latter opening his domain, he realizes that he's simply dead. He has no means of negating the sure hit, instant kill effect of the domain, and his first thought in his final moments is simply, sorcerers are shit. You have to force your comrades to sacrifice their lives for others. That's why I quit. Or you could say, run away. And I think that little distinction at the end is interesting. You know, he knows someone has to do this role. Someone has to exercise these curses. He just couldn't stomach doing it himself. Although he saw it as slightly selfish, he just didn't want to be the one doing so. Anyway, the flashback starts off with him in a bakery making some simple small talk, or rather, the baker starts off with it. He's totally uninterested in what she's saying, and is honestly a little rude to her, although I don't think he means to be. But there's this very clear contrast between two different approaches to work in life, right? Nanami pushing himself to earn even in a job he doesn't really care for, and this bakery girl who presumably doesn't earn as much, but is doing something she cares about. And don't worry, I know what you're thinking. This video is not going to be anywhere near as simple as just weighing up these two things. She seems very sweet and happy, obviously the polar opposite of the cold, dispassionate Nanami. But what's particularly interesting is the contrast in Nanami in these following 2 pages. Firstly, we see him not disposing of the curses on his shoulder, as he just doesn't want to have to deal with the hassle of looking weird, which seems quite, you know, heartless. But then in the very next page, we see him working at his job and training up a new hire. And whilst his boss pushes him to sell everything and anything, regardless of whether the clients will actually profit, Nanami speaks of a more ethical approach in balancing risk and being sincere with the clients. And that's the side of him that he just can't let go of. And I think the way he acted with this bakery girl and just doing this job itself goes against his very core as a person. He'd later talk about how his job doesn't actually help anyone in a real sense, that it's outside the natural human cycle, and that it's ridiculous that it pays so well in spite of it. And none of that has ever sat right with him. And so all he wants is to make money to retire and leave it all behind. He's willing to sacrifice his health, even if it means overworking himself to a hideous degree. Like, who does an overnight shift at a job like this? Stock markets aren't even open overnight. It would all be so much easier if he could just sell his soul, pun fully intended given his fight with Mahito, but if he wasn't so worried about actually making his clients happy, he could just make them buy garbage stocks that won't profit. His boss would be happier, he'd probably get promoted and earn more, he'd get to his goal of retiring that much quicker, but he just can't. He thinks he's given up, that he's sold his soul, but he hasn't. And in my experience, that feeling of, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing that instead, it never really goes away. The obsession Nanami had with money started after leaving Jujutsu High. He didn't have it beforehand, but I think he's tried to kill that righteous part of him following Haibara's death, to bury it down and pretend it doesn't exist, as after all, he can't change the system, and realistically, that's all of us. We're not going to be able to overthrow the working world, but maybe we don't need to. Maybe the small things you can do right now and are happening to you right now are enough. The conversations we get to have, the activities we have the opportunity to do, the little moments of gratitude towards ourselves and of course others. For Nanami and many others, we've realized that endlessly chasing promotions is not the answer. You know, maybe instead of constantly chasing the future of once I get this, once I earn this much, once I retire, once this happens, maybe instead there's something meaningful you can start now. Maybe you could change your job to something that doesn't feel as hollow. To quit your job for something lower paying but possibly more meaningful is scary. Because money is the one thing you can quantify and easily see, like, yeah, this job pays more. And so even if the other job still pays enough to live on, it's still hard to let go, right? I personally kind of did this. I took a small pay cut to be able to work from home more at a different job. And even just that small change, I can say, was absolutely worth it. You know, maybe the right call is to change to something that's better for us, rather than working and earning more and spending that money on making ourselves feel normal again. And if you're in that situation where you can take that risk to quit your job and go in on something separate, maybe you should go for it, you know? But not all of us can. It's easy for people online to say, oh, you know, quit your job, escape the matrix, but we have bills to pay. And especially if you have a family to look after, it's not that simple. And even if you do manage to do it, I don't think it's going to be the magic solution to all your problems that you're expecting, but we'll come back to that. But personally, I don't think it's necessary either. Maybe you could start something on the side and look to grow it like I do with this channel, or, and this is the more important part, maybe we just need to be more conscious, more appreciative of these little moments around us. Speak to that person that you walk past, do something nice for your family, start something that excites you. Nanami returns to that bakery the following day, and it seems like he's at his breaking point, as though he's realized that there's more to life than just working himself into the ground. My job involves holding on to rich people's money and making them even richer than they already are. Honestly, even if I'm not there, nobody will be bothered. But if bakeries disappear, people who want to eat bread will be troubled. And with that, he exercises her curse and walks away, back to Jujutsu Society. And this baker's simple thanks was enough for him to realize that he has plenty to live for. It doesn't need to be some grand purpose. Her gratitude was enough. We don't need to be able to change the world. You know, something could be as small as a thank you, and yet so incredibly meaningful. It could be as simple as baking bread and be a purpose as such. It can be as ridiculous as I don't want to say philosophy anime channel, that feels like giving myself way too much credit, but anyway, you get the point. And don't get me wrong, what Nanami does is pretty huge, right? He's saving people's lives. But the point being, he gave up that dream of retiring early, that one day, decades from now, to do what good he could right now. And even in what he thought would be his final moments, he had no regrets. He's satisfied. Do you really think he could have said that if he didn't go back? And so Nanami is once again a Jujutsu sorcerer. And going back to his first introduction when he's with Gojo, it's not like he's made this change and everything's perfect. You know, there's still parts of this he hates. He hates the way the higher ups operate. He hates having to deal with Gojo's nonsense. And There's a scene in episode 12 where he hangs the idea of a promotion over Ino's head to get him to kill the transfigured humans, even when he was very clearly very uncomfortable with it. It's not something Nanami particularly wanted to do, but he had to in order to rush over to Yuji to save him. In my experience, this idea of a perfect job, this purpose without anything you dislike, just isn't realistic. It probably won't be as extreme as this, but there'll be things you don't like, and expecting that not to be the case is only going to trap you in endless discontentment. Personally, I thought all my troubles would go once I got more days working from home and left my old job I hated. And it was definitely an improvement, but it didn't solve everything. There's parts of my new job I don't like either. And that's why I put such an emphasis on appreciating the things outside of work more, because you can definitely start to enjoy that. And I also think it's for that exact reason that Nanami has his time-based pact to help him minimize overtime. It was a promise to himself to never go back to his overworked life he had before. And so there's a lot of things we look at Nanami and can respect and wish we embodied: his discipline, his selflessness, his perseverance. But maybe in addition to all of that, we should include his courage to walk away from something he knew wasn't right for him, his desire to make the world a better place in whatever way he could, be it through teaching the next generation or through helping out in emergencies when he's needed. He gave up a lot to do so, and despite taking a moment to dream about what his simple life in Malaysia could have looked like, I think he dies satisfied with how he lived. You know, if he had no regrets before, I don't see what would have changed between then and now. And again, what a beautiful character Gege is written here. So grounded in realism, fully conscious of the despair the world can contain, and yet completely optimistic to his core. Not through naivety, but through the genuine belief that he can make a positive difference in the world. Even when trying to fight against that side of him, he found himself simply wanting to make the world a better place in whatever way he could. And if this cynical, by-the-book salaryman can do that, despite all the horrors he's seen, why can't you?